Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy, and thank you so much for joining me for it. And thank you especially to the patrons who help make this show possible for you every single day with their support at patreon.com/SW7x7. And a quick shout out to all the motorcyclists who are tearing around even at this late hour here in central New Hampshire, where we are in the middle of Bike Week. Yeah, it's the second biggest one in the nation after Sturgis, and man oh man, it's quite the party. There are, I think, tens of thousands of people descending on the general area, and this is the 101st annual Bike Week that's happening here. Pretty crazy. But we're not here to talk about motorcycles. We're here to talk about Family Ties, which is the latest installment in the Tales from the Occlusion Zone series of short stories in Star Wars Insider magazine. This one is in issue 226, which is in subscriber mailboxes, and if it's not on newsstands yet, it should be very soon. This is a full spoiler podcast, and yet not a heck of a lot happens in this particular one, even though it actually seems to be one of the longer installments in Tales from the Occlusion Zone. Occlusion Zone, did I say that right? Occlusion Zone. So when we last left our heroes, they had just made a shocking discovery. Gail Tarpfin, and I hope I'm saying that right too, who is the chief of security on Starlight Beacon. Back in the day, well, they thought she was dead, and they found her, the Adrins and their other Republic Defense Corps people that have been hanging around with them on the wrong side of the storm wall. They found her on a Nile prison ship where it seemed like everybody had been infected by some, biological, some sort of contagious terror, basically. And so what happens is, in this particular installment, they take Tarpfin onto their Republic Longbeam ship, and even though they don't have a medical droid, they have a medical droid database, and they're able to get a droid to plug in and scan through and figure out, how do we save Gail? Because Gail is enclosed in some sort of, weird carapace, basically, and ultimately, it becomes a medical drama. So, suddenly Gail's breathing seems to stop, and then heart rate monitors seem to stop. And we have Joss and Pika, and they have created, one of them is, Joss is pregnant, or is it Pika? Gosh, now I'm all confused and recording this away from everything. So, they've kept our pregnant hero in the cockpit and away from the hot zone. They've managed to create a quarantine situation so she'll stay safe. They ultimately figure out how to save Gail, and Gail is able to say, all right, you save me, let me save you. But we don't necessarily know how that saving is going to happen. They are headed for the storm wall, trying to figure out how to get out. The whole reason why they were going after that prison transport was because maybe there was a path engine thing that they could cannibalize and use it to help them, hyperspace their way out of the storm wall. But whatever this, contaminant was, seemed to be over all the drive components and whatnot. So they figured they couldn't risk taking it. And even with, Gail, getting out of this carapace, there was some of this, gray matter that was clinging to Gail's, fingers and toes. And so they actually amputate, which is kind of amazing and, done, very clinically, not graphically in terms of the way it's described. But as they're heading for the storm wall, Gail says, nope, you shouldn't be heading for the storm wall. You should be heading entirely in the opposite direction. And unfortunately, of course, it's too late, because then Nile ships show up, and then more Nile ships show up, and a whole bunch of Nile ships show up, and everybody thinks, oh my gosh, we're toast. And, the Adrins are like, well, maybe not. This is too many Nile ships just showing up for, one little ship like us. This must be part of something bigger going on, and that's the cliffhanger we're left on. But it really is an even greater cliffhanger, because it's not going to be addressed yet for another couple of issues. They have a thing at the end of the story that says it'll be continued in issue 229. So, that's another 3 issues from now. And there's going to be, I guess, a couple of other stories in the interim that we don't necessarily know about yet. Alyssa Wong is going to be writing whatever the next one is, which will not seemingly be a High Republic story. I don't know. They're not really clear about that. Alyssa Wong is one of the High Republic writers, but whatever is happening on Corellia that they're writing about, yeah, don't know if it's a High Republic thing yet, or if we're just getting a, like a meanwhile on Corellia, or if we're getting another story tied into another situation entirely. But that's pretty much all you need to know about Family Ties, aside from the fact of why did they name it Family Ties. And quite honestly, I'm not exactly sure. I mean, there are some people reflecting on their connections to family, but it doesn't really seem to drive this element of the story too much, actually. But yeah, still intriguing, still curious to see where they're going with this. But that is basically the deal, and that is basically this episode of the podcast. If you enjoy the show, if you enjoy the daily doses of Star Wars joy that I've been delivering since 2014, if you can believe it, then I hope you'll help me get it in front of more people, and you can do that with your ratings and reviews and your likes and your comments and your follows and joins and subscribes, and even just telling people is a big help too. And you can even help me produce this daily dose of Star Wars joy as an independent creator. And it just costs a cup of coffee or so. And you can learn more about that at patreon.com/SW7X7. And it just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me for this episode, as always. And may the Force be with you, wherever in the world you may be.
7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.